Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined by the other host, Scott Melson. Hello, sir.
Sup, dude?
How's it hanging?
Pretty solid.
I've not said that phrase in a very long time.
I wasn't expecting that. No, man. Yeah, life is good. As we were talking before we heated up the mics, we were talking. I'm a little tired, a little sleepy, but can't complain.
You and me both. Well, hey, let's
dive right in.
Let's dive right in with just get to the news. That's right, everyone. It's time for the news update. Only one news story really to talk about this week. It's mine. This is a different kind of episode today. The big news today is that Let's Fix This and the League of Women Voters of Oklahoma have kind of partnered up, and we have officially launched a new initiative called People, Not Politicians.
People, not politicians.
Right.
That has a nice ring to it.
Well, I think it resonates with people, mostly, not politicians so much.
That seems good.
And this is not to say that politicians are not people. Clearly, they are. But the intent behind this is that we are advocating for something for the people, to give some power to the people, and honestly take that power away from the politicians.
So this is a big piece of news. This has been something that has been in the works for quite a while. You have been spending days, nights, weekends, long car trips focused on this for at least probably, several weeks now for sure. What is People Not Politics? What are you doing? I'm taking on the role of interlocutor here today. Ooh. You like that?
Yeah, I do.
SAT word.
Right. So this will be a different episode in several ways. One, I'm the guest and you're going to interview me.
Indeed.
All right. So People Not Politicians, I suppose, really started back at the end of 2018 or early 2019 for me, when Let's Fix This started kind of having internal discussions about if we were going to have a kind of an agenda of issues that we wanted to help educate the public on and maybe even advocate for, right? And we really settled on this like slate of issues that are all systemic issues. So not healthcare, not tax policy, not criminal justice. Like those are things that are worthy of debate, and we talk about them all the time here on the show. But for us as an organization, I kind of presented a list, and you and the rest of the board kind of ratified this list of things that are what I said is the fabric of our democracy, or systemic things. And the top of that list was establishing an independent redistricting commission that is ending gerrymandering, right? And I think on, as our listeners are well aware, we've just completed a series on gerrymandering.
I was going to say gerrymandering. I feel like I've heard about that recently. I feel like
we've done a few episodes on it. And as we were doing that, it was all so serendipitous that this has become an issue that the League of Women Voters nationwide has been championing. Yes. And they've been supporting it. And in fact, they were not able to be with us tonight because Jan Largent, who's the president of the state chapter of League of Women Voters, and Rebecca Greenhaw, who's the president of the Oklahoma County chapter, are both in Washington, D.C. At a Fair Maps conference. So they're
fancy.
Actually, they're learning more about it as well. So, from conversations that we've had, and, we did this kind of listening tour over the last few months going around the state. And honest to God, the issue of gerrymandering or redistricting came up in every single one of those, which was not expected, right? Because, admittedly, this is something I didn't know much about even a few years ago. And I didn't expect that many people do. And I guess to be fair, most people don't. But the fact that somebody in each of these towns, from Bartlesville to Lawton to Tulsa and Oklahoma City and Norman, that someone brought this up, means that there are people paying attention to this as an issue.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting to me that everywhere everywhere we've gone, this is something that people bring up, like, hey, this is something that we can fix. I mean, it's something that seems to cross generational boundaries. There's young people that are in favor of this. There's old people that are in favor of it. And it crosses partisan boundaries for sure, right? I think one thing that's really important for us as an organization, this is something we always is at the forefront of our minds when we're meeting, as a board and kind of talking about where we're going, is to make sure that we're not taking on anything that's partisan, right? Like, this is not something that is meant to benefit one political party. It's meant to make sure that people are the ones who are in control of what their government does, not that government is in control of who their voters are.
Right.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's probably a good point to kind of pause and refresh our listeners' memories, right, about what gerrymandering is. And it's when politicians manipulate their voting districts to give themselves an advantage, right? Racial gerrymandering has been deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. That's well established. The issue of partisan gerrymandering has been coming up lately, and we've talked to some folks about it over the last couple of months. And the fact is, when politicians draw district lines for themselves, they inherently draw them in a way that is to their advantage, right? And it has been this way forever.
It's as old as the Republic.
That's
like literally as old as the Republic.
It definitely is. And it's admittedly like a little trick that politicians from both parties do to keep themselves in office. And what we are launching here, People Not Politicians, is a ballot initiative to amend the Constitution, to the state constitution, to create an independent redistricting commission that is a commission of regular folks, of regular citizens that are there to take the power away from the politicians, give it to them, and let them draw the lines in a way that is fair and transparent.
So I think one thing that's important to get out there is when we talk about gerrymandering, in our interviews, we talk with folks from California, and we talk with folks from Michigan, and we talk with Dr. Keith Gaddy, who'd worked on maps in Wisconsin as well as around the country. We actually hadn't talked that much about what gerrymandering looks like in Oklahoma. What's been the impact of gerrymandering in Oklahoma, and why, other than the fact that people are concerned about it, which is reason enough by itself, but beyond that, what's been the impact of gerrymandering here, and why is this important to address now? Right.
I mean, I think, so to answer your first question, the impact of gerrymandering here is that when politicians are more concerned about getting reelected than and drawing districts that virtually ensure that they will be reelected, that means that they are not accountable to voters and that they don't have to vote in a way that their constituents want, and thus they ignore like our very real problems, right? Like the issues of school funding has been going on for years and years. Yes, they gave teachers a raise. Yes, they gave some more classroom funding. But at the end of the day, the funding level today is still far below what it was 10 years ago. And we have far more students, right? Criminal justice reform has had some strides, and they've been working really hard at it, but the legislature still doesn't hear bills, right? Healthcare is an issue. Roads and bridges still crumbling, right? Like if you've driven around recently and hit a pothole, it's tough. And there's stuff all over our state that is not being addressed because politicians feel like they don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that sticks out to me too about what's important about this is, as we've talked about with any number of the folks that we've interviewed, gerrymandering leads to elections that are kind of inherently less competitive than they should be, right? And when you have politicians not having to work to get people's votes, I think they tend to be less responsive to constituents' needs, right?
Right.
And that's why you see, and so to me, one of the places that you'd see this impact in Oklahoma is the number of state legislative races we have that are not particularly competitive.
Right. I mean, make no mistake about it. Oklahoma is a conservative state. I mean, 47% of voters are registered Republicans. That's not going to change. And if that reflects the electorate, so it shouldn't, right? Like the goal of this effort is not to flip seats, or it's not even necessarily to make districts more competitive, though that very well may happen in some areas, and that's fine. That's not a bad thing. But our goal is to just take the power away from politicians, right? To eliminate this very obvious conflict of interest that they have, where they are writing the rules of the game, and give it to people who don't have the same political motivation, the same self-sustaining or self-promoting initiative or reward there, and say, no, this group of 9 regular folks is going to draw these districts in a way that is fair, that reflects the population of the state, that reflects communities of interest, and they're going to do it in a way that is totally transparent, which I think that's a huge thing that doesn't happen right now, right? And I think we've talked some in our Gerrymandering Oklahoma series that the way in which redistricting happens in Oklahoma right now is that the legislature draws the districts however they want, and so long as the governor signs it, and they always do, that's law. And we don't get any input in that. We don't even know who they have in there sometimes, drawing the lines. We don't know what data sets they're looking at. We don't know if they've laid on Facebook data, and you don't get a say in saying like, oh, no, wait, that's, this neighborhood and the neighborhood next to us, we're really close. Like, we're really a community of interest. They draw them, and they just put it out there, and we're left kind of holding the bag there.
And we don't know what their priorities are, right? I mean, we can guess, but we don't know, like, oh, this District X was drawn this way because of this community of interest or because of this whatever. We can only speculate.
Well, and I'll be honest, I've spoken with some former legislators that were involved in redistricting the last go-round, right, in 2011, and they said to me, well, I'll tell you what we didn't consider. We didn't consider communities of interest. We didn't consider if people were getting a fair representation of their community. What they did consider was like
how they can get reelected.
Who had to drive the farthest for FFA meetings, or do they have to drive more than 50 miles to the state capitol? Because if so, then they get per diem, right? And so people making sure that it's just
54 miles,
something like that.
I'm going to hold my tongue there. So Andy, why do you feel like an independent redistricting commission, an IRC, why is that the solution that's best for Oklahoma?
Well, because it's the only way to keep them out of it, right? So I've joked that this is a complicated solution to a simple problem. The simple problem is politicians gerrymandering districts for their personal gain and ignoring our real problems in the state. The solution is developing a policy that will withstand the test of time, that keeps the legislature and the executive branch out of it, that vests that power in a nonpartisan or you could say like an omnipartisan, right? Like, we've designed it so that it will represent all parties equally, R, D, I, whatever, and to keep that power away. So there's not this obvious conflict of interest, right? And it's funny to me, like, Scott, you're a physician, and so you're not going to, you have certain patients you can't see because it would be a conflict of interest, right? As a therapist, for me, like, I can't see family and friends. That would be a conflict of interest, or a dual relationship is what we would call it. For attorneys, they can't work with certain clients if they have another client. For marketing, public relations, they can't have like 2 car companies, right? Like, you can only kind of have one of each set. Anyone who's watched like Mad Men has like learned this, right? And so it's just bonkers to me. Like, I remember when I learned the fact that we do redistricting and it's just up to the legislature to draw the lines themselves. I think, maybe this made sense 100 years ago when they had, way fewer people spread out over a lot larger area and just paper maps, right? So they had to draw lines that kind of made sense based on rivers and lakes and towns. But about 20 years ago, computers caught up to stuff. And now, especially after the last presidential election with all the Cambridge Analytica stuff, state legislatures can buy Facebook data. They buy voter files, and they can put it all into a big system and, crunch the numbers and like gerrymander down to the street level, to the house level.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think that really, when I've talked about this with folks, and I've talked with folks who it's not that they think that partisan gerrymandering is fine, but folks that don't think there needs to be a constitutional or legislative remedy, because they say, well, this has gone on, this is so old, it's part of the fabric of the country, it's part of the way things work. And my answer to that is yes, but when Gary, what's his name, from Massachusetts in like 1795, the guy that gerrymandering
Elbridge Gary.
after, Elbridge Gary, yeah. When that district was drawn, you didn't have a computer with an 8-core processor and 64 megabytes of memory able to spit out 15,000 different maps and have the precision that you have now, right? It wasn't possible.
The software they have now, it does it in real time, so it aggregates all the data, and then you can literally move your cursor, and it does it. And in fact, to our listeners, if you haven't done this already, on our Gerrymandering Oklahoma blog post that came up a couple of weeks ago, it has all 4 of the gerrymandering episodes, and then at the end, there's a link to that gerrymandering or the redistricting game you can do online. It's fictitious. It's very simple. It's 4 districts. You
should totally do it.
You have to do it on a desktop, so you can't do it on your phone or a tablet. You have to do a laptop or desktop. It's a browser-based game, but it's real eye-opening to see, and it's basically a very simple version where you use your mouse and you draw the line, and it recalculates race groups, partisan standing, and something else, I think. But it kind of calculates it all in real time, and it's what really happens in redistricting is just like that game, but with way more data and with obviously higher stakes.
So you mentioned, and I'm glad it's a perfect lead into my next question. You said this is a complicated solution to a simple problem. What does this look like for Oklahoma? We talked last time when we talked with Katie Fye from Michigan. Mm-hmm. We said there's 14 states that have done IRCs. They all do it differently. Mm-hmm. What's the Oklahoma process going to look like?
So I think it's important to know that I believe ours will be the first one that is a truly independent, kind of completely independent from the legislative branch and from the executive branch. So there's no commissioners that are appointed by anybody. It uses the judiciary, that's kind of a best practice, right? So we talked to the Brennan Center for Justice. They are the experts on redistricting in the country. We talked to them a whole lot. We talked to the Campaign Legal Center and some other people. We've had some really smart attorneys. We've had multiple attorneys look at this. We've worked with Republicans and Democrats to kind of put this together, and independents to put this together. And the way it kind of works is that the Chief Justice appoints a panel of some retired justices. They're not appointed; they're actually kind of drawn at random out of the pool of all the justices that are interested, and then they open applications. Right, so let's say 10,000 people apply. That would be tremendous, right? If 10,000 people applied, these 3 retired judges or justices review those applications and sort them and kind of rank them and put the top 20 applicants from the state's largest party into one bucket, the top 20 from the next largest party into another bucket, and then the top 20 from no party or neither of those parties into a third bucket. So right now it's Republicans, Democrats, and independents, right? So those...
Would libertarians go in the third bucket?
They would, because they're not in the 2 largest parties. There's 9,000 something registered libertarians right now. But, we try to write the policy so that in 100 years, who knows, it could be like the birds and the elephants and the, raccoon party. I don't know.
Maybe the Whigs will make a comeback.
The Whigs, there you go. Could be anything. The Dixiecrats. Let's hope not. So anyway, there's 20 in each bucket, and the justices basically draw out by random selection, 2 from each bucket. That makes 6. 6 commissioners, and then those 6 commissioners go back in and they pick one more from each bucket intentionally. So it's not appointing, but they are selecting them with the explicit instructions to do so in a way that balances the commission for geography, for race, for ethnicity, for gender, that kind of thing. So we don't, because we have to have someone from every congressional district, but we don't want, 9 white guys, right? Like we need it to be reflective of our state. And then once that's formed, it's a 9-person commission that is basically comprised of 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and 3 independents or libertarians. They then go about the business of redistricting. And that looks like traveling the state, holding town hall meetings, talking to people, studying previous maps, right? Talking to smart people, having guest speakers come in to inform them. They can hire consultants. They have to get the files, get the some map making staff, some GIS staff, and they sit down to draw the maps. The one thing they cannot consider, and this is important to know, is they cannot consider where the incumbent lives, which is certainly different than how it's done now.
So, will they be paid for this? Is this a volunteer position? Like, how does this work?
Sure, they get paid. They, I believe, if memory serves, and I've not slept a lot the last few nights, but they receive a per diem that's the same per diem as the legislature receives. This isn't a full-time job, right? They're not working.
It's a lot of work, though.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of like kind of behind the scenes data gathering, and then the actual process of drawing the maps and stuff is, thanks to computers, is
pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And the other thing that I mentioned earlier that I want to reiterate is that everything about this is transparent. So unlike the legislature, the Independent Redistricting Commission would be subject to the Open Records Act and Open Meetings Act. So everything has to happen where the public can attend. All the data is made public. Everyone gets to see that. And that is a huge step in a state that is arguably one of the least transparent states.
So I'm going to give you a hypothetical. I'm a state legislator. I just finished my 12 years. My last 4 years, I was Speaker of the House. I am now retired. I'm term limited out, so I'm going back to private life. And man, being one of the members on the Independent Redistricting Commission seems like a pretty solid gig for me to carry forward my passion for public service. Can I be on the commission?
You cannot.
What?
Yeah. So that was another important caveat, is that anyone who is in an elected office that's a partisan office, right? So any kind of partisan elected official, anyone who has been a staffer in the legislature, anyone's been a staffer for one of the political parties, and lobbyists, regardless of anyone who's been a registered lobbyist for the past 5 years cannot apply, nor can someone apply if a member of their immediate family has been any of those things, right? So no legislators, no lobbyists, no party staffers, no legislative staffers, or their immediate families.
In the words of Squints from the fantastic mid-90s movie The Sandlot, is that forever?
No, it's just for 5 years. And
5 years.
That's an important distinction, too, because some opposition. Michigan has a similar clause, right? I mean, first of all, it just makes sense, right? Like, you don't want legislators who are just in office rolling out and getting to draw lines right away, because we can't ensure they would do it in a fair and transparent way. This is the same reason that the Ethics Commission has attempted to put in a cooling off period, right? Like a 2-year kind of block on former legislators becoming lobbyists, right? Is, if for nothing else, then for appearances. So ours is 5 because we redistrict every 10 years. This is a big deal. Also, those who are commissioners, so even if you've never been elected office, so Scott, you've never been in a partisan elected office, you would be eligible to be a commissioner. Whether or not you get picked is a different story, but you would be eligible to apply. Let's say you are a commissioner. You could not then run for an elected office, a partisan elected office, for 5 years, or maybe it's 4 years after that. because we don't want people drawing districts and then running for those districts immediately.
What's a district that I could win? This one looks tasty.
Let's make sure I include my house in this district, right?
Very cool. Well, so as it turns out, this is not the only redistricting work that is going on right now. Speaker McCall, about 2-3 weeks ago, announced that he was forming a bipartisan working group to prepare for redistricting. The Senate appointed some members to their group this week. Very lots of great talk about bipartisanship and transparency, and we're going to make sure that this all is just great. How do you feel like what we've seen come from the legislature here in the last month compares to this plan for drawing districts?
Sure. So I think, it's important to distinguish that the House and Senate plans are very different. They were very different the last time they did this as well. The House has said what they're doing. They've announced what they have stated what they intend to do. They haven't actually done anything yet. So as of this recording, they've announced that they're going to form a committee, but I don't believe they've announced who's on that committee. They've just kind of said, we're going to do this, and we're going to do some town halls about it. But at the end of the day, it's still the legislators drawing the lines, right? Honestly, politicians are great about saying, we're going to listen to the people, and then totally disregarding whatever the people said, right?
Yes, sir.
And the same thing with the Senate. Arguably, the Senate has they announced that the two people who are going to chair their redistricting committee, it's two Republicans. Although to be fair, the Senate is like 76% Republican, and they've also hired a consultant. That consultant was Lieutenant Governor Todd Lamb's chief of staff, and he ran Lamb's failed gubernatorial bid, right, in his campaign. And so this is someone, I don't know him personally, but he is someone who is distinctly partisan, right? And he's going to be the one that's consulting on this because, as we said, they fully intend to gerrymander, right? Like that is the rules as they know them. We are seeking to change the rules to make them more fair.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here. And as I'm kind of thinking through this and thinking what might be some of the main opposition or objections to this, and I want your take on what the answer to this is. So I'm hearing about this for the first time, and I say, Andy, this is a partisan deal. I didn't hear anybody bitching about gerrymandering in 1992 when the Democrats had controlled the state legislature for 80 freaking years and they gerrymandered the hell out of those districts. Where were you then saying that we needed some independent redistricting commission? You're just wanting to do this because the Republicans have been in control now and they redistricted the way they wanted to in 2010, and now you're trying to take it away because you don't like it.
This is a good role play. First of all, I would say in 1992 I was in 6th grade, and I lived in Minnesota, and I didn't care about politics. But the other part, what you said is true. The Democrats did gerrymander the hell out of it for like 80 or 100 years, right? Also, the Republicans tried to pass laws to implement an independent commission way back then.
What?
Because they were in the minority.
No.
Yes, and then now that it flipped in the mid-2000s.
Say it ain't so.
So now the Democrats are in the minority. They've tried to pass independent commissions. Those bills, the majority party just doesn't hear those bills. So, of course, the minority party, regardless of who it is, wants to pass it. So this does give us the great example that at one point or another, both parties have wanted this when they would stand to gain from it. And the thing I'll say is this isn't a partisan issue. This is a power issue, right?
Yeah.
It's always who doesn't have power wants this. And right now it's the people, man. It is the politicians in power trying to keep their power. Nobody gives up their power willingly. But that's not the way that we should run our state, right?
I think that's so important to emphasize. This cannot be said enough. In every state that has done this, the party in power who holds the majority is opposed and the minority is in favor. Every single one. And every single state, both parties have gerrymandered anytime they've been in control for redistricting.
Right.
So to me, exactly what you said, that is the comeback for why this isn't a partisan issue. the point of this is not to give one party or another more seats. The point is to make sure that people are represented by politicians who A, didn't pick their voters, and B, best represent the set of communities and the best represent the district in which they live, right? Like that's, to me, that's what it's about. Is that?
Yes. I mean, this process is designed to generate a truly independent commission removed from partisan politics, right? And that we have to draw lines. We have to redraw lines, as we've heard in this series, to reflect population changes, right? Well, we know that.
And it's a vital process. It is really important to remember that, right? This is not a situation where like you can just draw the lines and say that's what they are and they stay that way forever. You have to redraw the lines.
Right.
And our Constitution says you do that every 10 years with the census. And so how do you do that in a way that makes sure that people are most accurately and fairly represented?
Right. And, the other thing that people suggest is like, well, why don't we just have computers draw them then? Like, and just take people out of it entirely, which is a totally valid thought. And that's where I went to first, when we first started kind of researching this last year. The answer is you need both, right? Like you can definitely leverage the power of computers to make this a lot easier, but computers don't always know what communities of interest are, right? Because it may not be apparent based on just data. Like it takes people going to talk to people and then having the political will, or just the will, if we take politics out of it, just the will to draw those lines in a way that is reflective and has a heart and compassion for people, right? Like we have to conform to federal law. So we've got to draw districts of equal population size. We have to comply with the Voting Rights Act and make sure that minority voters are gerrymandered out of having a voice. But we also have to draw it in a way that reflects all the communities of interest to the extent possible. I mean, there's only so much you can do, but to the extent possible, and to do it in a way that is transparent, right? And let's say that the House comes back and they really do establish a bipartisan commission and they do all these tours and they draw good maps. Okay, well, great. Like we got lucky, right? And they would probably do that right now because they know the heat is on them, right? Going back in history, neither the House nor the Senate ever announced any kind of redistricting information this early in the process.
Really? I wonder what could have prompted it this year.
They almost certainly are aware of this, that we've been working on this, and have went ahead to kind of get out in front of it. And so,
you mean this is like the bipartisan healthcare working group?
Right. That's right. Well, that's funny. I mean, this is we've set this precedent in our state, right, where the legislature refused to hear medical marijuana, and the people passed it at the ballot. And so then they're like, oh, okay, well, now we got to talk about it. So they had this working group, and they're all like, rah, rah, look at the things we did. And then they finally they got a little bit better. They started talking about healthcare, right? But they did not pass anything. Did they even hear those bills about Medicaid expansion?
No.
Okay, so talked about it, never heard the bill, and now the people are getting on the ballot, right? And we expect to hear, I think, in the next couple of weeks that they got the signatures, and that means it'll very likely be on the ballot, right? And likewise with this, again, this bill, this type of commission has been proposed by both parties almost every decade for the last 40 years, but it hasn't passed because the other party didn't want it to happen at that time. And so, okay, well, they're clearly not going to do it. It'd be way easier to go through the legislature. But if they're not going to do the work, then it's up to us, the people, to get this done.
So, you mentioned at the outset that this is a joint effort. Let's Fix This. League of Women Voters have come together to form this, people, not politicians, right? So is Let's Fix This going away? Does this mean am I out of a job? Do I have to,
did you have a job in the first place?
Do I have to stop introducing myself as Mr. Vice President?
Well, your term is up next year, I think. We got to review that. But no,
check the bylaws.
Yeah, Let's Fix This does not go away. And to be clear, this People Not Politicians is let's say it's a new initiative that is born out of these other organizations, but it is itself a separate it's a 501c4. It's a separate entity entirely with its own bank accounts and all that stuff. And so Let's Fix This remains. In fact, we have a new intern coming on board this semester, maybe 2, and we will be able to like ramp up some of what we do, right? Because up till now, Let's Fix This has been like a side passion project or a side hustle, right? That all of us have kind of dedicated time and energy to, and while a huge chunk of my time will be dedicated to this campaign, it's all in the same kind of vein. And so it helps. I've got some time in office to like sit and get some interns. And if we can get additional funding for Let's Fix This, like additional donations, then maybe we can actually hire some full-time staff to continue the work that's very important that we've been doing, right? Of doing voter education, civic engagement. You and I have kind of been talking through what our plan is for the rest of this year, and then we'll get into session. So I expect that we will talk about redistricting like as an education component, but as a 501c3, we won't really be like advocating for it. We'll just be kind of educating about it, and everything else that happens. We still want, like, we will still do the podcast every week about whatever is happening at the legislature. If we have news, I'll make some new music that's just for redistricting and the sound of a marker on a board or something, and give updates. But no, it very much stays where it's at.
So as you mentioned, just to reiterate, this is a ballot initiative. This is a campaign. Your official title is what?
I guess campaign manager.
Campaign manager. So what's campaigns involve lots of things. They involve events, and they involve, petitions, and they involve donations and fundraisers, and what's next for the campaign, and like how do people become involved and support this, assuming that's what they want to do, which you guys all want to do because you're listening to this podcast and you're fixers. And this is like, I'm not going to say it's the ultimate fix, but it's definitely like a first step to the ultimate fix.
I mean, I'll say this is one of the top 3 things that would change our democracy for the better, like the most substantial, right? The second
100% agree.
And one of the top 2, I'm not sure which is 1 and 2, but something like open primaries or ranked choice voting, I think, is the other thing, right? And then like automatic voter registration are the 3 that I think are the biggest. And the data says that's probably true. So what's next for the campaign is, yes, we desperately need people. Like, we need listeners. I need your help. Here's what I need you to do. Go to peoplenotpoliticians.com and sign up, right? And when you sign up, you can choose if you want to host a house party, right? And you can have me come to your house and invite your friends over, and I'll talk about this for 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. You can buy pizza, maybe we can hang out for a little bit. I'm happy to answer questions. We need to get the word out because most people don't know about redistricting, and people don't even know that we do it. So go on there, sign up to do that, or to help host an event like a town hall in your neck of the woods, right? So if you're in Oklahoma City or Tulsa, that's great. If you're in a rural area, even better, because people there often don't have the same opportunities to engage in the political process that maybe folks in the cities do. If you've got friends or family in rural areas, tell them, get the word out, help share stuff on social media, help connect us. And we need volunteers. So not just volunteers for like helping us get the word out, but we need you to sign up for when we start collecting signatures in a few months. We need your help in collecting those signatures because we need 178,000 of them. So I need all of your signatures and your nearest 178,000 friends, right? and then of course donations. Like we need help. This campaigns are not cheap. They're certainly not free, and we need money to help make yard signs and to run Facebook ads and to travel the state to like get the word out about this. And so any amount helps. Even $5 honestly is a huge deal. This is truly a grassroots campaign, and it's going to take all the roots of all the grass we've got in this state to make this happen. Unlike Medicaid expansion that has big groups like the Hospital Association and stuff behind them to help out, we don't have like a natural constituency base, right? Like this isn't just a healthcare thing. This is a people thing. And we need all the people we can get. So peoplenotpoliticians.com, sign up and get some updates and, throw us a few bones and help us come out and we can make this happen.
Well, my guest this week was Andy Moore, Executive Director of Let's Fix This and Campaign Manager of People Not Politicians. Andy, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Scott. Thanks for having me. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. As always, don't forget to rate and share Let's Pod This on social media and on iTunes or whatever it's called now, Apple Podcasts. This is a production of Scott and I. He is at SC Melson on Twitter, and I'm at AndyOKC. You can follow the organization at Let's Fix This OK on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all those things. Or just go to our website, facebook.com. Our website is letsfixthisok.org. Facebook is facebook.com/letsfixthisok. Our music is provided by the Sugar Free All-Stars, and we are a member of the Mostly Harmless Media Network. Let's Fix This is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that strives to educate and equip all Oklahomans to engage their government. We encourage you to get involved any way you can. And remember, decisions are made by those who show up. Have a great week.